Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so excited to those of you who are on the call today to have you listen in to our live webinar for Mentoring Women's Network, and we're here with Tracy Edmonds. The purpose of our call today is really to get to know Tracy and learn a little bit about her career and what she's passionate about, as well as what advice she has for other female leaders or aspiring leaders. And so, again, thank you. We're going to start the interview here in just a minute, and then there will be time for questions and answers. So those of you who are logged into the live webinar, you'll notice a spot on your screen that enables you to ask questions, and so we encourage some dialogue and some questions, and we'll be taking those even throughout the call. So we hope that this will be interactive, and again, thank you all for joining us. We're really excited to share this with you today, and this will also be a recorded webinar, and so we'll have this in the archives for others to be able to learn from as well. And so Tracy, just to get us started, I know that you've worked for a large health plan, or that's where you are now, and as I see, you're the Director of HR and Diversity for the organization. And if you could, and you and I have had the chance to work together before, and so it's fun to have you here today. And,
thank you.
And learn a little bit more, delve a little bit deeper. But if you could tell us a little bit about your professional career and how you got to where you are today.
Certainly. Well, first of all, thanks, Allison. You know, mentoring is something I'm really passionate about, so the opportunity to speak and talk a little bit about my career and hopefully pass some things on is really important to me, so I appreciate the opportunity. Gosh, my career, as you mentioned, I do work for a large health insurer, and I've been there for almost 25 years, and I started out at entry level. Literally entry level, claims processor at the organization. And I joined that company because they had a great tuition reimbursement program. And that was really important to me, to be able to pursue my education. So I signed on, and you know, before I knew it, every couple of years or so, my career was progressing. So I went from that claims processor to a business analyst, ultimately to leading very large projects in the organization. And I won't bore everybody with all the details, but about every 2 to 3 years, my career changed significantly, and so ultimately I had risen to the level of a regional vice president in the organization, leading the operations support functions for the organization. So I've done a lot of different things there, primarily in operations, and that was up until about, gosh, I guess about 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, when I was kind of going through some changes in my personal life. I was having my 3rd child, and had been with the organization at that point 19 years, and the organization was changing significantly, going from a very regionally focused organization to an enterprise organization. And I stepped back on maternity leave and said, you know, I'm not loving what I'm doing anymore. And it was taking a lot of time away from my family. And so I really reevaluated my priorities and what I wanted to do. So I guess I kind of shifted into kind of legacy mode after, you know, what am I going to leave behind? What am I going to do? What's going to be my mark? And I made a shift in my career, and I went from being a regional vice president in operations to a program director in HR. And I moved my family from Cincinnati to Indianapolis, and I began a new career in HR. And so I've been in HR for almost, I guess, 5-6 years now, and I am currently the director of HR and diversity in the organization. So slowly building back up. So that's kind of my path and what brings me here today, you know.
Well, and I love the uniqueness of your path and the fact that you really took the opportunity to have an assessment and think about what was important to you, you know, as you're evaluating your next opportunities. What are you most passionate about?
You know, that's a great question. When I had an opportunity to really step back and think about my career, when I made the career change, that was one of the key questions, because I wasn't having fun anymore. The passion was gone. And I really had to think about what excites me personally and professionally. And everything I thought about, I took an opportunity to get feedback from people I worked with. I took an opportunity to get feedback from girlfriends, you know, that support network that you build, and really ask them, what is Tracy good at? And so I took their input and my own input, and I've always loved coaching and working with people and mentoring others to get results, either for them personally or for the organization. And that's kind of what took me towards HR, because I love the business that I'm in, but I also love to see the people really, really grow and develop. I love it when you can put a team together and 2 + 2 = 5,
Sure.
and you get some really big results there. And I love working with people one-on-one individually to see them get the same kind of results. So that's really what my passion is. That's why I'm here today. I mean, you asked me, and I said, sure, I'm on it. I love it. Love it.
Well, I noticed that passion immediately.
Yeah.
Someone you have it together, and you're also very focused on what you're owning, what you're great at, what you're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely.
and so I knew that it would be fun to have you here today to really share that passion with others. And so talk to me a little bit about maybe what have been some of the biggest learning opportunities for you in your career, or whether it's something you would consider a mistake or just something that was really a learning opportunity for you that maybe was a pivotal time in your career.
Yeah, when I talk about making the career change, that was really pivotal for me, because I realized that I didn't have a passion for what I was doing any longer. And that was a real rude awakening. I kind of grew up in the field that I was in. I grew up in operations. I started at the company, wanting to go to college, and just kept progressing with the company. And I realized that I hadn't really owned my career.
Sure.
Others had seen so much in me, which I'm very thankful for, and had supported me, had advocated for me, and had opened a lot of doors. And so my career continued to progress. But I don't think I ever stepped back and said, what does Tracy want to do? And what does Tracy like to do? And so I don't know if it was coming up on 40 and having baby number 3 that did it. I don't know what it was. But it was a period of self-reflection where I said, you know what, I don't know that this is me. Mm-hmm. And so that would be one piece of advice that I would offer women in particular, because you're trying to balance home and work, and we have a habit, we're kind of conditioned to try to please all those areas of our lives. I think it's really important that you step back and understand who you are and what you want. And so it took me 19 years to figure that out, that I didn't want to do that any longer.
Well, I think that's very inspirational in and of itself. I think so many of us get pigeonholed into one area, mm-hmm. and not, as we've talked about before, strategic enough in our careers to really step back and look at what's most important, right? Yeah. And evaluating those opportunities against what our values are and that sort of thing. And those can certainly shift, as the dynamics shift. And so along those lines, what do you see are the kind of the emerging or the changing landscape of the organizations going forward?
Gosh, where I work, it's really interesting. I kind of play a dual role. So I'm fortunate in many ways, although, as you and I have talked, it's tough when you're doing, 2 jobs essentially. But I work in the HR space, meaning that I directly support a part of our business from an HR perspective. So I get to see the challenges they're dealing with day in and day out. But I also lead our diversity initiative. So I see those challenges as well. And, I don't know that this is new, but companies continue to struggle with finding good talent, good female talent, good diverse talent in the organization. And I call those out in particular because of the changing landscape of the world, and who the consumers are for the companies out there today. They're not white males any longer. And I work in the healthcare industry, and so women are the primary decision makers around healthcare. Sure. And so finding talent out there is really, really critical. When we think about the new consumers with the Affordable Care Act, where more and more individuals now have access to insurance, that's a diverse population. And so being able to find associates who can lead that kind of work and can understand that consumer base, that's really critical. So that's what I see people struggling with the most, and I think that's probably not uncommon, that talent has been the key, but it's a changing look at what talent is,
Absolutely, and so, as we look at the kind of organizational structure and, mm-hmm. and the lack of really top female leaders, in your mind, what are some of the tactics or things that it's going to take to get women to advance in their careers?
Mm-hmm. It's going to take an appreciation of kind of where women stand, you know what I mean? And what I mean by that is I'm not always sure that there is a complete understanding of diverse talent, female talent in particular, and what we're dealing with in terms of the work-life balance. I think there's still, a huge misunderstanding around that, mm-hmm. in terms of thinking that, like when a woman starts to have children, you know, that means instantly her career, she's not going to be as focused, and her career isn't going to be as important to her, instead of looking for ways to be flexible in that situation. So I think there's still a lot of assumptions that go on that we still have to fight through. You know, so I do think it's going to take a lot more open dialogue. It's going to take some more risk-taking, you know, and I think so often, or at least what I see in my organization, is we see leaders who are very focused on finding the perfect ideal candidate who has had all of the perfect experiences that make them most qualified. And I think there are some people out there that just are talented. You would bet on them in a heartbeat because, you know, they're strategic, they're like a dog on a bone, and taking risk isn't something that a lot of people want to do these days. And I think to change the landscape, we're going to need some risk takers who are willing to say, hey, let's put that woman in that role and give it a shot.
Absolutely. I think that's great. What who have been some major influencers in your career?
Wow. I've had a few. I would say my mom has probably been the biggest influencer in my life, period. You know, my mom was my best friend and my biggest supporter. So just knowing that you're supported, and I think we get that through a lot of people in our lives. I think women tend to reach out to other women and build networks and look to that kind of support. But my mom has been that cheerleader for me. But I've had a couple of women during my career who saw things in me that I didn't see, especially early in my career. And so one woman in particular, I can remember we were both working on a big project for the organization at the time, and she asked me to go off-site with her to work on a particular piece of the project. And we were friends, so it wasn't completely unusual for her to ask me to do that, but we went ahead, we went off-site, and as soon as we get some time alone, she says, have you seen these jobs that are up, that are out, and have you thought about posting for them? And I mean, my perspective of myself was so very different than what she could see in me in terms of the talent. And I said, no, I hadn't even considered it. I mean, I was a program manager at the time, early in my career, and leading a big piece of an enterprise project. However, I never considered myself worthy, I guess, or qualified at that time to be a leader. So there were some director, VP level roles that were open. Never thought once about it. Thought about all the women around me who I thought would be great for those jobs, but never thought about me. And she said, you really do need to consider it. And she talked to me about what she saw in me, the skills that she saw in me. And that was eye-opening, to have someone come to me and say, hey, you are talented and you have as much to offer as any of those other women you're thinking should have that job. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and I got that job. And so that was my first real management role. I became a director of a 100-person claims unit, which I was just shocked. I never thought of myself that way.
I think that's neat when somebody else sees something in you. I think a lot of times, you know, statistically, we kind of talked about women, we don't see ourselves as leaders, right? And so I think that's really incredibly meaningful when you have both the family support that you referenced earlier, which is amazing, and I'm sure she'd be very proud, but also someone who's willing to see in you the traits that that you maybe don't see in yourself at that point.
Right, and I think it's important, at least for me, to pass that on. So when I see it, I try to acknowledge it, draw it out, you know, highlight it for people as well, because sometimes it just takes that one person who has more confidence than you have in yourself at the time, and they can give you a push, can be there for you, and just support you through it, you know. And so that made a huge difference in my life. That was the beginning of my management career. Never, ever would have thought of it myself if she wouldn't have tapped me.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And you referenced something earlier that is I think so critically important in the workplace is how we're validating one another. How are we really not just, I think sometimes we get so focused on sharing feedback about opportunities for improvement and, you know, I needed this yesterday and that sort of thing. But you know, as we're, because you struck on something when you said it was so meaningful for you when someone else saw in you what you didn't see. And so as leaders, as we're able to do that for others, or even our peer group, I mean, you know, being able to share the feedback of what you see, you know, in terms of talent and in terms of contribution, I think can be really incredibly meaningful for all of us. And so I think that's a really neat thing. So what's some of the advice that you would have for the next generation if you were to if you were to be able to talk to your 22-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh, wow. Well, one, like I mentioned before, would be to own your own career. You know, I didn't own mine for a long time. Great things happened for me. I was blessed in that way. I shouldn't say I had absolutely no ownership of it, because each of the opportunities that came my way, I made choices about what I wanted to do. But I never really gave a lot of thought to the impact I wanted to have, how I wanted to show up, what might be good roles for me. They kind of fell into my lap, and others coached me into them. You know, and that's how I reached my crossroads of I've been doing something that, not that I didn't care about, but something that others saw in me and not necessarily what I wanted. Sure. For 19 years. So that would be one thing. The other thing for women, especially, I would say, is know yourself, because I think there is a conception that you can have it all. And I'd like to qualify that a little bit. I think having it all depends on what is important to you. So it's important to be self-aware and to understand what you value most, and then ask yourself, is your life aligned with that? Because that was one of the career questions I asked myself as well at that point, at that turning point. You know, what do I value most? My family. However, there had been times in my career where I really wasn't focused on that, you know, and so I couldn't say that I was living my values. And so in terms of having it all, it becomes about knowing what's important to you and making decisions and aligning your career around what's important. So times when those weren't in sync, weren't good times. You know, I spent time working on my MBA, leading a major project, and I had a son who the first 2 years of his life are really, they're a blur. They're a blur, you know. Regrets, no, because it was a choice. But when I think about it, that's not what I really value. I value my family, and I missed a segment of his life. And so that's disappointing. So it's about lining it up now. So I'm very conscious about lining it up now and making sure I'm in sync with who I want to be.
I think that's great. And so there are a couple of directions I want to go in, but I do want to touch on the family aspect, because I do think it's inspirational for the women who are either mothers now or thinking about becoming mothers to hear stories like yours about how you have been able to achieve some success, or a lot of success with having a family.
Yeah.
And so, you know, talk a little bit about what that balance looks like.
Yeah, you know, it really is crazy, and I'll take you back to the time I referenced about working on my MBA, leading a major project at the organization, and having, at that time, I had 2 children. I have 3 now, and you know, when I made the decision to go back to school, I think I even have to step back a little bit further, because we had 1 child, and I was balancing the decision around, do I go and get my MBA, or do we have a second child? Because we knew it was important to us to have a few children. And I was really, really struggling with that, but I got my head on straight, opted to have the baby. We had the baby, and I'm literally on maternity leave, maybe 1 week into it, and I turn to my husband and say, I need to go back to school, and I need to do it now. He thinks I'm completely crazy and hormonal, but my rationale was I wanted to do that in order to get that out of the way before T-ball and riding bicycles and all those things that were important for my children and for me to be a part of started. So I made that commitment. And when you talk about balance, I mean, my life was crazy, but I was committed to it. So here's where my thought process went. I stepped back and said, what's most important to me? And I prioritized. And I said, okay, my family is number 1. Number 2 is my health. And number 3 is my job. And number 4 is school. So what that meant for me is getting up at 6 a.m., getting into the office, doing my work, getting back home. Like, at the end of the day, though, I'd hit the treadmill with my girlfriend, get back home by 6:30, maybe 7 o'clock, spend that time with my kids until they went down, spend time with my husband, then study for school from 11 until 1, maybe 2 in the morning, get up at 6 a.m. and do it all again. And so I lived that way for 2 years and got a lot of gray hair along with that, but it was, I was happy. I mean, I was having a hard time, no doubt about it, but I was happy because I was living in alignment to my values, you know, what I talked about, and so I got it all accomplished. Now, I was sleepwalking through some of that. So when I talk about not really remembering what went on the first 2 years of my baby's life, yeah, you know. I was there for important milestones, never missed those. I was there for dinner every night, but it was very much a blur. So I wasn't engaged like I probably wanted to be. But I feel good. That's why I say no regrets about that time. It was a choice, and it was aligned with what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Oh, you and I have some commonalities there too. I remember I went through school with one small child. I walked across to get my degree and I was pregnant. And so I remember the days of work, and I was working full time. So working full time, and dinner with the family, and then doing the nightly routine, and then starting to study. And I read the studies about how, you know, as a gender, we as women would still try to do everything in that, you know, and so we're still trying, and it like you said, I like how you put it about being aligned with our values. And so it's not that, I mean, yes, on one hand that sounds like you're trying to be superwoman, okay, but on the other hand, you recognize that there are several things that are important, and so to really hunker down and put in the time and the hard work, you know, right time that it's critical, is something that is great, and you didn't want to miss out on the dinners with the family, and so where you know, again, I'm making generalizations, but you know, statistically, what I read was men would have a tendency to, okay, Dad's studying, and shut the door, and, you know, and I thought, I've never done that. I always waited until everybody was down, everybody was happy, but you know, what an incredible time and an incredible accomplishment for you as well.
Yeah, it was hard work. I was pretty proud of that because it was a lot of hard work, and we had a very successful project. And you know, when you think about it too, from a support perspective, I can, you know, and decision perspective, there were times when my house was a mess. You know, because that was the trade-off. I didn't have any time to clean a house. But that was the trade-off. My husband took on doing the bills. I talked to my team at work and said, "This is what's going on with me. You know, I'm gonna pursue my MBA." And so I tapped people on my team to pick up more accountability than they may have had before, because I needed that kind of support. So that was helpful too, to kind of pull in a support structure. And of course, I have a really great girlfriend who has been in my life since I started with the company. And so having a support structure, again, that person in the background when you can't root for yourself is there for you. She's been there for me.
Absolutely. I think that, and you described a lot of kind of creative ways to delegate and to you know, reprioritize, and you definitely strike me as someone who gets things done. So.
I try to.
So that's really an art, not a science. You know, talk to me a little bit, and I know that you know, I guess if I were to, I know that there are people that are participating on the call or part of Mentoring Women's Network who come to us and they've hit sort of an unexpected bump in their careers, right? And so where they sort of had their plan A all lined up and had an idea of where their career was going, and then for you work in HR, so you know that this happens all the time, and for whatever reason, you know, job's been eliminated or something along those lines. You know, talk to me a little bit about, you know, if you were to suddenly hit an unexpected bump tomorrow, what steps would you take? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I do coach people about that very often. And the first thing I would say to myself and to others is, you know, you have to think about your career in a really broad way. You know, it's a journey. It's not, you know, it's not something where you lock in and you know where every step is going to be. You know ultimately where you're trying to get to, but the path may not be a straight one, and it may not be one that's straight up every time. And I really have to coach younger women and men about this, because I think they want to go, you know, every step needs to be up and up and up. And there's a lot to be said for lattice moves and lateral moves and 2 steps forward, 1 step back in order to get the skills that you need to be successful. So I probably tell myself, take a deep breath and keep the, you know, the big picture in mind. And oftentimes I have to remind people, and I would remind myself, it's not so much about a particular role as it is about the contribution you want to make, you know. So when you know yourself and you know what you have to offer, then you can think about how do you want to impact an organization, or what type of footprint do you want to leave behind. And so I know that probably sounds like an old lady talking, but I think that's important for even people who are early in their career, because very often they're thinking, I want to be the CEO, or I want to have this particular role. But it's really about what you uniquely bring to the table and how you impact that organization. or how you impact the world. And so I really encourage people to think that way as well. You know, really understand yourself. I've talked about that a lot, about being self-aware, but also think about transferable skills, because very often when we talk about, you know, our history, our career, what we've done, I hear people talk about, I've done this and this and this and this, and really what people want to hear when you're looking for that next opportunity is how you can add value. And if you get so locked into a particular role and the tasks of that role, you'll miss what your true transferable skills are that you can take from one very different role to another. And so that was key for me, because my background was 19 years deep in operations. That is the payment of claims, the answering of phones, you know, the enrolling of membership at our company. How did I get to HR? You know, and people ask me that all the time. Well, it was stepping back and knowing how I added value in those roles. So it really wasn't about I improved, you know, customer service call handle time and all of that. It was about my leadership skills, you know, and what I could do with those. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I kind of rambled everywhere, but that would be some of the guidance, and it is some of the guidance I give people on their careers.
No, it actually did. It resonated with me, and in terms of, because that's what I try to coach people to do, you know, or mentor people with as they're making transitions, whether they're expected or unexpected. But I think many people have a clear picture in their mind of what they want. But in terms of being able to make a clear path to get there,
right.
Sometimes it involves not only sacrifice but a willingness to, you know, take a step back. I work with a lot of college students just as they've you know, gotten out of school, and they know many of them come and say, I want to work in nonprofit, and so, you know, a great way to get started is really to get an internship, whether it's paid or unpaid.
Right.
The value that you garner from that is really it's invaluable, and so you know, those are, so what you're describing, I think, is a lot of the knowing what your transferable skills are and how they could translate into a different career, having that vision of what that career is, and then figuring out how to get the experience to be able to show to a potential employer.
Yeah, absolutely, because when I made the transition in my job, I was, I guess, 4 steps down from the CEO when I was a regional vice president. And then when I went from that role, literally managing an organization of 300 associates, I took an individual contributor, program director, project manager, essentially, role, you know, in order to learn. You know, so it was about, I've got these great transferable skills, but I don't have depth in HR. So I got to be humble and go get me some depth in HR. And that was absolutely cool. And I can remember my husband saying to me, well, where are you going with this thing? And I'm like, I don't know where it's going to take me exactly, but I think I can be a leader in HR at some point. But I don't, he's like, but you don't know HR. I said, I can learn that. I can learn that if they just give me an opportunity to get in. And so I did get that opportunity. But my coaching to people, especially young women and young men, very often want to see the clear milestone steps that will continue to progress them to the top job or the job they envision. And it's not always a straight path, and that's okay.
It's okay. Well, that's really freeing. It's a great mentality, too, and I'm sure there are times that you are maybe questioning, you know, making that decision or how that was going to, and getting used to even the identity piece around that, right?
Oh, gosh,
I mean, I can imagine what that would.
Man, I didn't even know how to book my own flight anymore. I'd had an admin for however many years, and, you know, where's the copy machine, and how do I work these things? So it was very humbling, but worth it, you know. But definitely worth it.
Well, and you sound so happy that you've made that transition and that you're in a position that really aligns really nicely with your skills and your passions. And so when you combine those things up, regardless, and feel like you're making a contribution, I think you're absolutely a success. You know, and so that's exciting for me to hear. Talk to me a little bit about mentors, whether you talked earlier about people who had had a real impact in your life, but I also know that you've mentored and inspired others as well. And so, you know, just if you could elaborate a little bit on what those relationships have looked like and what meaning you've gotten from the mentors in your life or from being a mentor.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, mentoring can take lots of different shapes. You know, I think very often people believe that mentoring is very structured, that it has a very specific outcome, and that you formalize a relationship of some sort. And there are mentoring relationships like that, but there are mentoring relationships that are quite informal, you know. And just to share a little bit, the last time you and I connected, I was not in a good place, and you provided kind of some on-the-spot mentoring and coaching, you know, and that's mentoring, and that's valuable, and that gives you a piece of information to help make you better and help you adjust and for you to learn something. So those are teachable moments, and those are mentors in your life when you run into them and they provide that for you. So I've coached people very formally, where I've been in a formal mentoring program where I was matched as both a mentee to someone, and I was also matched as a mentor. And structured monthly conversations, but ones also that continue beyond the contract of the relationship. So, but I also have ones where individuals reach out to me specifically for career advice. And so I may mentor them for just 3 months. We may meet, you know, for an hour every month for 3 months, or we may meet a couple of times over the course of 6 months to have some conversation about something specifically. So I've seen degrees of that. I would tell people, you know, don't hesitate to ask someone to mentor you, or sometimes you don't even have to put it that formally, because I know a lot of times if you go to somebody in your organization, a busy executive, and you say, would you mentor me, they're going to freak out. Like, I'd love to. They'll be flattered, but they're thinking, well, how much time is this going to take them, and what do we have to do? And so sometimes it's just asking. I've asked people, would you have time to go to lunch with me or to spend an hour with me talking about X? That's mentoring. You don't have to formalize it and say, mentor me. You know, I've had very structured relationships, as I mentioned, with a mentor over a 12-month period. I also had a very specific relationship with someone to mentor me on finance. You know, that was an opportunity for development for me, so I reached out to someone I knew in finance and said, would you spend time with me teaching me finance? You know, and so we sat down together, what did I need to learn, and we structured it out, and we did it over maybe a 4-month time period. So there's different degrees of that. I would tell people not to have something in your head about what mentoring looks like, because those opportunities can happen quite on the fly, actually.
Absolutely. Well, what you're describing is what most of us have experienced,
Mm-hmm.
where you cultivate relationships with people who have different perspectives or different levels of experience or passions. And I heard recently that you're a sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and I think that's a pretty powerful statement if you think about it. And so, so it's why it's so critical to surround yourself with people who are, you know, kind of work from the art of possibility and have different perspectives, but also driven and ambitious, if that's what one of your values are, right? But you know, knowing who those experts are in the different industries. And the other thing that, as you know, and you and I have talked about this, when you do mentor, it's amazing what you get out of that relationship too. So, you know, you hear yourself giving advice, or you that you know that you need to take yourself. Absolutely. And I say that because you had mentioned, you know, getting some mentoring when we met the last time, and I remember that conversation, and I took from that something, you know, a very similar outcome that, ooh, I need to go take that right now. So, you know, it's fun to have those relationships, but as you said, it's about cultivating relationships with people who have not only shared values but different perspectives and different, you know, different experiences and expertise areas.
Yeah, you know, that's a really critical point for those who may be asked to mentor, and you may say, what? Could someone want to learn from me? Never underestimate, you know, the power of your experiences. You know, you may think they're trivial or they're not of value, but they can be very eye-opening for people. And also, don't miss that opportunity in terms of what you get back. Because a big part of the reason why I mentor, one is because I feel like I should pay it forward, because I don't believe anyone gets to where they get to alone. You know, they may think that they do, but no one accomplishes great things completely in a vacuum. It does not happen alone. But I also do it because I get a lot of value back personally. As I mentioned, I've been with my company almost 25 years, 25 years in the same place. And so it's important for me to talk to new people coming into this organization. What's going on outside the 4 walls of my company, you know, where they come from. And so it's been great to mentor people who are much younger in their career than I am. because they keep me up on things. They keep me thinking about the world in a different way. And so I get educated through that. So it really is something, don't knock it if you get asked to mentor, because you'll get a lot out of it as well.
Oh, absolutely. That's incredibly meaningful. It's fun to see the studies and statistics that even support that.
Oh, yeah.
And that being a mentor really gives you as much, if not more, than the mentee in that relationship. So what advice will you give to someone who is going to a leadership position for the first time?
Wow, it's interesting you asked me that, because one of the women that I have been mentoring got her first management role. And we've been talking about that and what that's like. And it really took me back to think about what it means to be a leader. And what was interesting for me is to kind of take you back to a story when I said I got my first management job. I was a director of our claims unit of about 100 people. And it was interesting that the way the building was situated, you got off the elevator in the front of the building on the floor, and my office was all the way in the back. So I traversed all the way through, all the associates, went, straight to the back to my office. And I did this day in and day out for about a month. And one of my managers came to me, and she closed the door and said, "Can I talk to you about something?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Is something wrong?" I said, "No." She said, "Well," I said, "Why do you ask?" And she said, "Because you come to work every day and you make a beeline to your office. You don't really look up. You don't really speak to anyone. You go in and you get started working. And we're just wondering what's going on." And I'm thinking, why would they be concerned about that? And to me, right in that instant, as she was talking, it dawned on me, this isn't about me anymore. It's about all those people sitting out there. They are looking for me to be their guiding light, their person who is pointing out the direction we're going in. If I look down at my feet when I walk from that elevator to the back, then something's wrong. They should be worried, because I am a reflection of them and where I'm trying to take them. And that was like a new hat. I'd been a great individual contributor and doing my own thing, and someone saw some leadership skills in me, but I didn't really know what it meant to actually be a leader. It meant that I am accountable for them, And I didn't have any kids at that time, too, so I really didn't know. I was a newbie. I was fresh. And that was an aha moment for me. And so when I coach people going into that kind of role, know that there are some new accountabilities on your shoulders. And what got you there, as Marshall Goldsmith says, won't keep you there, So you've got to really focus on what it means to be a leader. People now look to you. If you are a leader, others are following, so lead them well, You can't shirk that responsibility.
Absolutely. That's a neat story, because again, you're focused on what you need to do,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And not realizing the impact that was having in the rest of the office and the team. And if you can put yourself in their shoes, they're looking at you going, "Oh boy, something's wrong."
Something's wrong. They thought something was wrong organizationally, or that they weren't doing something right, and it really was nothing. It was me still being me as the individual contributor, and not realizing that all eyes are on you when you are a leader. They are expecting you to lead so that they will follow.
Absolutely. Should not have a bad day.
Right, exactly. Or when you do own it, that, hey, I'm just having a bad day,
So what are you motivated by?
Wow, that's a great question. Seeing people do great things, that's what's exciting to me. I can't tell you how excited I was for the person that I mentored to hear that she got that management role, And not that I did anything, she did it, but to have known that all the struggles, the coaching, because she applied for several, and it took a while. She never gave up. That's the moment, that's the goosebump moment when you go, whoa, it's so powerful to think that in some way, maybe something you said helped, or just the support you gave made her stay in the game. And to see that kind of result. So that's what's really cool. And so in my role in HR and in diversity is, I've told you, I want us to win a Catalyst Award. I want to see women do great things. I want to see minorities do great things at that organization. So that's what will warm my heart. That's what makes me feel good. That and listening to my kids laugh when they're together. That inspires me,
What's some of the best feedback you've ever gotten? This feels like a job interview. I know. I'm sorry.
Okay. Gosh, the best feedback I've ever gotten. You know, it might have been just recently, actually. My manager, I was with my manager and another woman, and we were just actually having a drink after dinner, after work. And we were talking about kind of what was going on in our careers and that kind of stuff. And my manager said to the other woman, she said, Tracy underestimates her impact, you know. And I guess I do in some ways. I'll own that. I do. And she tells me, you do you. You know, do what you do. That has been some of the most constructive feedback, because I think sometimes we get into organizations, and organizations have a culture, and sometimes we can begin to question ourselves. And, you know, if I do that, am I pushing the envelope a little too far? And what the most freeing advice has been, you do you. You be you. Because when you are you, it's on, you know, and you have an impact. And don't ever underestimate the impact that you have. And that was very freeing, you know, to have someone in your corner saying, I like you just like you are. You know, do more of that. And that was very recent, you know. So that has been very, very powerful feedback. And I will say also I've had a great feedback session several years ago was when I had a performance review. And it wasn't a bad review, but my manager was also calling out places that I needed to step up more and to lead more strongly, you know. And it was just the best conversation because, again, it came from a place of someone who believed in me and was saying, you can do great things. Do more of this and more of that. And so it would have been one of those reviews that many people would have been like, man, you got your butt chewed. Because in some ways I did, but I got it chewed in terms of the capabilities, in terms of leveraging the strengths, and not about all these flat sides that you need to make better. And that would be advice I would give to someone too, is when you get feedback, I think very often there's a focus on the deficiency. And the deficiency only really matters if it's critical to the role and you want to do that role. But if it's not germane to the role, don't spend your time trying to hone things that you're not perfect at. Take what you're strong at and refine that and knock it out the ballpark. You know, we all got a flat side. That's the 80-20 rule. Go with the good stuff, you know. Don't worry about sharpening the 20 unless the 20 is critical for the role. And so often I've seen these feedback sessions, and I've had them in the past, where people say, here's your assessment, here's the 2 things out of 100 you don't do well, let's make those better.
Right.
Why?
Right.
You know, why? You know, really ask yourself why when you get that kind of feedback. You know, how will this make me better? How will this enable me to do my job better?
Right.
You know, because 9 times out of 10 it isn't always about that. We're not going to be perfect.
Well, I think a lot of times we focus on what we need to improve, of course, right? We're always, you know, trying to cultivate continuous improvement.
Yeah.
But there comes a point, I think, where you are so focused on, or you're trying to be good at so many different things.
Right.
And you somehow overlook the true God-given talent that you have.
Exactly.
And I think that's what you're talking about in terms of, you know, that's very freeing. And so, and I love that, you were talking about feedback from a place of seeing the value or seeing your potential.
Right.
And that is very powerful feedback. Yeah. And so it's very different than just, you know, slamming you because you're not doing your work or whatever, but just saying, you know what, you have so much talent, and I want to see you in this role. And so I think that's incredibly powerful and meaningful. And so I have another, I think, great question. If you were to, you know, kind of project, let's say even 20 years into the future, what would you have wanted to accomplish in your career? What would you, if you were to think in terms of legacy and what you would say about your career, what would be some of the accomplishments you would highlight?
That I would see some of the women that I have mentored doing great things. And by that, I don't want to say in particular roles, because I think success is defined by what you value and what you want. But if I could see them living their dream. You know, like I said, I was almost like this woman was my baby. That when she got her job, I'm like, oh my God, because I knew how badly she wanted that, and she realized that. And so to see her power to do that and to somehow have freed that in her felt really, really good. So to see more and more of that, and I've had moments like that in my career where people reach back. I had a young man reach back to me, gosh, it might have been last year, and I remember when I hired him. I was pregnant and shortly going out on maternity leave, and hired him in the organization, and he always talked about wanting to do work in strategy. And over the years, he and I, again, this is kind of the definition of mentoring. You know, we didn't meet on a regular basis, but when he needed me, I was there. And so he would reach out, we'd set up a time, we'd have a conversation. I could give him insight about where the organization was going, how to best position what he wanted to do, and he's in a strategy role now. Now, it took a few years, but it was so gratifying for him to shoot me that email and said, I got my strategy job. You know, he said, and I know that it might have taken a few years, but I just wanted you to know that the time we spent together mattered. It made a difference. So it's those kind of things, you know. So it's not CEO, but it's people realizing what they want to do. So that would be very, very empowering for me to have, you know, a handful of people like that I can reflect upon and know they're out there. And then, honestly, the other piece would to see more women, more diverse talent in leadership roles in the organization. I'm on a mission, you know, because I think it can happen. Because I see a lot of diverse talent, female, minority there, that I want to see make it to the top. If that's what they want, then I'm there to help them, you know. So that's what I'd love to see 20 years from now.
I love your legacy, because I would hold the same one.
Yeah.
And there's something really incredible that the first time that you, and it never really goes away, but that you're able to help someone get a job or get promoted, and know that you had even just the opportunity to get someone else to see their true value and their talent.
Because it's not even about us as mentors. What you get the goosebumps from is when you see that they locked into the sweet spot of who they were, and they made it happen. And there's an energy that comes from that, and you're like, wow, I like that. Give me more of that, you know?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I'm just thinking about it and thinking about examples of that, and how I would say the same thing in terms of a meaningful career. You know, looking back and knowing the impact that you had, and also that you and I, as you know, have a shared passion for advancing women leaders.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Being able to look back at the landscape of the country and see more women in top leadership positions, more women helping to support one another, and really just a cultural shift. And you know, my passion too is that you know, we've talked a lot about work-life balance, and a lot of times that's associated with gender, right? I see that more and more being not a gender discussion.
Oh, in my house it's not.
No.
You know, my husband and I collectively are looking for balance. He's got the same challenges I do.
And so and I think the partnerships of the future it's not the work-life balance piece is not going to be centered around the female population. Men also want to have an active role in the family, and they've not really been afforded the opportunity to do so. And so my hope is that going forward we align talent that's reflective of our population, and also you know, homes that are reflective of our values.
Great.
So I'm going to open up to questions for the group. I know we have quite a few people on the line right now, and so we're going to use the last 15 minutes to get some questions. One of them comes from someone who works in the leadership development arena.
Okay.
So she says, how can we appeal to HR professionals for women's leadership development who express concern that we aren't serving the men too?
That is an interesting question. It's a tough one, but you know, when especially I think about this in the diversity space, because if you have, let's back it up and say, if you have a business issue, at least at my company, and probably most companies are like this, and it's impacting the bottom line, you get all over it. You know, nothing's held back. And when I think about the issue of females in leadership roles, at least for my company, there's a clear business case for why we would want more women in leadership roles, why we would want more Hispanics, why we would want more African Americans. There's a clear bottom line reason for that. because no one knows a demographic better than those who are a part of that demographic. And those are potential customers that are out there. So if there is a challenge with having enough women in leadership roles to really impact the bottom line, then like any other business problem, at least at my company, you would get on it and say, well, then maybe I need to develop women specifically so that I can have a pipeline of that talent. So that would be my argument back to any white male who may say, well, that's not fair. Well, I don't think there's a problem because the male is the CEO and the male is the CFO. And the male, I can go through countless significant roles, at least in my company, that are held by white males. And so that is kind of the perspective I have on a lot of different diversity issues. That it's hard to argue when it has an impact on the bottom line. So I would give that feedback that if you're trying to make the case for something, tie it to the bottom line because money speaks loudly in organizations.
Absolutely. What other questions do you have? Here's one. This is an interesting one. What phrase do you live by, if any? Do you have a motto or a phrase that you live by?
One that I live by professionally is that change breeds opportunity. I believe that wholeheartedly. And I think my career and my tenure at my company speaks to that. Like I said, almost a quarter of a century, and my husband says all the time, I don't know anybody your age that has been at a company that long, at one company that long. But I come back with the company has changed on a regular basis, and every 2 to 3 years it's changed very significantly. And without revealing who we are, but we've grown large through acquisition. So we've been a very different company about every 3 years, and that's a lot of change. But my motto is it breeds opportunity. So I didn't buck against the change. I looked for ways to be a part of the change. And so I always found my way. And so 25 years later, I'm still there, and it's a total different company than the day I walked in. And I'd like to think I'm a total different person than that as well. I've developed along with the company.
Absolutely. Well, I think so many changes, because we did some training earlier today, actually, and one of the things that the definition of a perceived threat was something changing. So it just the something changing immediately becomes a perceived threat, and so sometimes it's hard to adapt to those changes. And it sounds to me like you've been able to seize those changes as opportunities.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really incredible. So, what other questions do you have for Tracy? Looking for some other questions here. So what are the 3 character traits that you believe are necessary to inhabit or to have in order to succeed in today's world? If you were to highlight 3 character traits.
Agility is one. So got to be agile. You got to be not just flexible, but you got to be able to find your way at the same time. Not just bend with what's going on and don't let the change you, but be agile. See the opportunity in the change. So you have to be agile. I think you have to be you have to persevere. That's the other thing in today's world. There's lots of change. There's lots of new opportunity. There's lots of competition for roles. You have to persevere. And self-awareness, belief in self, confidence, that type of trait I think is important too, especially when you're navigating your career.
Is there any other advice that you'd like to share before we wrap things up today? Any other thoughts?
Gosh, we talked about a lot.
We have. This has been fun, by the way.
It has, hasn't it?
It's been
easy.
It's been, yes. Early on, I thought, wow, we have a whole hour, and we're definitely nearing the end. So.
I don't know that I have any additional advice. Be you. That's what I would say. That's when I've been most successful in my career, is when I've been my authentic self. That takes time. That takes a willingness to know yourself, to own yourself, warts and all, you know. And I think that that's really important. I've had people reach out to me for career coaching, and when it's come down to, okay, tell me about you. What are you selling? What are you? What is you? What are the transferable skills? And some people just don't even know. And when you challenge them to do that work, I may not hear from them again. Because I think people often want the easy answer that, oh, okay, well, there's a job opening that you would be perfect for. And it doesn't really work that way. If you're trying to build a career, you have to know yourself, and you have to be the authentic you, you know. Can't sell anybody else in the interview, you know.
Well, it's funny, when you were telling that story earlier about your friend and her telling you you be you, that was one thing that I was going to mention is immediately I noticed your authenticness. And I think that's what, so that if there was one takeaway from our talk today, I think everyone, the more authentic you can be. And that really comes from, again, and that's why, as you're talking about the shifts that you've made in your careers, intentionally, and and the pivots, if you will, in your career that not everyone is willing to make. It was very evident the first time I met you that not only do you have a passion for the work that you do, but you're definitely in an authentic place. And so I think that's something that everybody can really strive towards. And when you're able to be in a role where you can be your very best self and be real with people, and that, I think that's where that authentic piece really comes in, and people notice that right away.
Well, thank you.
So yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been fun. For those of you listening in, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your questions, and hopefully you've enjoyed the last hour of your time. We will also have this kind of recorded webinar up on the national site, so be sure to share it with others, but hopefully you've enjoyed it today. And Tracy, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. Great opportunity.
This was fun. Thank you. Bye-bye.